In a far corner of the galaxy, many civilizations traded stories about a strange species that once lived somewhere. Beyond the outer rim, yet no one had proof that these beings ever existed, and so most people treated the idea like an old legend that teachers shared to amuse young learners who liked stories of mystery and lost ages. Even though some of the elders insisted that the tales had roots in truth and were not simple fantasy, but almost everyone brushed them aside because no one had seen a human for thousands of years, and no one expected that to change. A quiet research world, an alien historian named Relin spent long hours in the old archive halls trying to find hints of forgotten species and lost empires, and he was especially drawn to the rumors of humans because every surviving record made them sound different from anything known today. He could not explain why, but he felt that the galaxy had not yet heard the last of them, even though no one believed him. Relin followed a trail of corrupted data files and sealed records till he found a restricted vault deep under the archive building, and inside he discovered fragments of a transmission that mentioned a hidden colony far outside known territory. But the files ended before he could learn more, leaving him with more questions than answers while Relin struggled with the missing pieces. A very different scene played out far beyond the edge of any star map on a hidden human colony that had kept itself away from the rest of the galaxy for many generations. No alien knew this place existed, and no humans spoke of it to anyone outside their secure circles, and most of the young citizens grew up never seeing another species and hearing only muted lessons about old dangers and past mistakes. Captain Laura Kane walked through the main command center of the colony defense fleet and reviewed daily reports with a calm focus that she was known for. She carried the weight of responsibility because she had trained for most of her life to protect the colony in case anything ever found them. Though no outside threat had appeared in decades, her interest sharpened when an alert officer called her to a console to show her a faint signal. Barely touching the edge of their long-range detectors, it pulsed in an uneven rhythm, as if it struggled to reach them, but it was enough to make Laura feel uneasy because no one should have been out. Their commander, Ryan Porter, soon joined her as he finished a patrol schedule, and the two approached the console together, studying the strange pattern the signal did not match any standard human code, and it seemed weaker than any planned broadcast, so Ryan asked if it could be a natural echo. But Laura shook her head because even a natural echo would look different to their systems. The signal kept pulsing as if someone or something was trying to send a message that had almost no strength left, and Laura ordered the team to isolate the signal and remove the background noise so they could understand what it was. Passed while technicians ran careful scans and filtered out interference from distant stars and drifting radiation, until at last the signal formed a clearer shape that looked like a compressed distress call. The team worked in silence as more lines of the message appeared on the screen, showing unknown characters mixed with patterns that looked damaged or corrupted. But one simple truth became clear. Because the call did not come from any human ship, it came from a vessel that none of them recognized at all. And that frightened the entire room. Laura and Ryan moved to a private meeting area to discuss what this meant. Both of them knew that the colony had survived for so long only because no one out there knew where they were, and this call suggested that some kind of ship from another species had traveled much closer than anyone expected. Ryan wondered if it could be a lost scout or a ship in trouble, but Laura thought about the risks and the old warnings that had been taught by the Founding Council, warnings that claimed the galaxy could still be dangerous for humans. Even after so many years in hiding, they returned to the main room and asked for any remaining pieces of the message, and soon the final fragment showed that the unknown ship had been captured by an enemy force, and the sender had tried to warn anyone who might receive the call that the captors were moving deeper into unexplored space. Laura and Ryan exchanged a long look, because this meant that a conflict was unfolding near their hidden territory, and if those enemy forces kept moving, they could discover the colony. The next day, the Human Council gathered in a large circular chamber at the heart of the colony to hear Laura's report. The members listened in complete silence as she and Ryan explained every detail from the moment the signal appeared to the discovery that an unknown species had sent it, and that hostile forces were involved. The Council had not faced a decision like this in many generations because they had lived in peace without anyone knowing they were alive, and now they had to decide whether to remain hidden or take action that could expose their existence to the wider galaxies. Council members argued that staying hidden was the only safe choice because revealing themselves could bring danger back to humanity, and some feared that old enemies might still exist beyond the rim, waiting for humans to show themselves again. Others argued that the distress call showed that innocent beings were in danger, and that turning away would betray the values that humans carried even in isolation. Ryan supported this view because he believed that the colony had grown strong enough to face the world beyond, and Laura agreed because she felt that doing nothing could lead to an even greater threat. If these hostile forces discovered the colony on their own, the room filled with quiet debate until the council leader asked Laura what she believed they should do, and Laura answered that she believed they should study. The signal further sent a small team to investigate and decide their next step. Once they understood the scale of the threat, she spoke with a steady voice because she knew that humans had stayed hidden for a reason, but she also knew that fear could not guide them forever. If danger approached, they needed to face it on their own terms, and not wait for the worst to happen. After long discussion, the council agreed that a controlled investigation was necessary, and that Laura and Ryan would lead the effort. Because of their experience and sense of judgment, the team would prepare a fast scout vessel capable of deep space travel without broadcasting their location, and they would try to learn who sent the distress call, who captured the ship, and what dangers were spreading toward the outer rim. The council also ordered a quiet increase in defensive readiness across the colony in case the hostile forces continued moving toward them. As Laura and Ryan left the chamber together, they walked in silence for a moment each, thinking about how much this decision could change the future of humanity, because leaving the safety of the hidden colony meant risking the discovery that everyone feared, yet the idea of turning away from a cry for help did not sit well with either of them. Laura finally said that whatever they found out there would shape what came next, and Ryan nodded because he understood that the time of living in complete secrecy might soon be ending, and that whatever happened next would ripple across the galaxy in ways no one could predict. For many hours after the meeting ended, Laura and Ryan prepared for their new mission, and the colony remained quiet as everyone waited for news, because even though no one outside the command center knew the full details, they could all sense that something important had changed across the hidden world. Many people in the colony had grown up with the idea that the outside galaxy was full of danger, so they tried not to think about it, but the arrival of the distress signal had already shaken that quiet life, and now every worker, every officer, and every family felt the tension in the air, as if the old legends were waking up again. Laura walked through the hangar where engineers inspected the scout ship that would take them into deep space, and she moved from console to console, checking power lines, engine readings, and shield calibrations, though she trusted the team she needed to make sure that nothing went wrong, because this mission could decide the future of the colony. She paused beside the ship and placed her hand against the hull, thinking about the long years of isolation that her people had lived through, and she felt a mix of worry and duty inside her, because she knew that leaving the colony meant stepping into a galaxy that had changed while humans stayed hidden and no one knew what waited out there. Ryan stood near the loading ramp, reviewing incoming files from the research center where experts were working to decode the last pieces of the message, and he looked tired, because he had spent most of the night trying to understand the strange symbols that appeared in the recovered data, and though they had not learned the name of the species that sent the call, they knew it did not match any ancient human record or any known enemy from the past. Ryan hoped the unknown sender was peaceful, but he also understood that a ship does not send a distress call unless something terrible has already happened. The research team finally sent an update that the message included a simple warning about a hostile force that had been growing in strength and searching for new sectors to conquer. Yet the damaged nature of the message made it impossible to learn much more than this, and this uncertainty created a cold tension in the hangar, because no one liked the idea of an unknown enemy drifting ever closer to their secret home. Laura and Ryan exchanged a quiet look as they absorbed the report, and Laura felt the weight of the unknown pressing against her thoughts, because if this force discovered humans, then the colony would no longer be safe as the engineers finished their work. Laura walked across the hangar and thought about the long warnings recorded by the founding council many years ago. The founders had feared that the galaxy might still hold threats that humans were not ready to face, which was why they had chosen to hide deep beyond the rim and build a new life without interference from anyone else. And for generations, people accepted this and lived without the noise of galactic conflict. But even then, some knew that hiding could not last forever someday. Humanity would have to step forward again, whether the galaxy was ready or not. Tryon approached her and asked if she felt ready to leave, and she nodded, even though the truth was more complicated because no one could truly be ready for something like this. Yet she believed that turning away now would only allow greater trouble to reach them later, so they had to take this step no matter how uncertain the path ahead seemed. When they boarded the scout ship, the hangar fell into silence, and every person paused to watch as the engines began to warm, the quiet hum turning into a steady vibration through the floor, and everyone understood that this moment marked the first time in decades that humans were reaching out into unknown space. Launch was smooth, and the scout ship slipped into the dark void outside the colony. And once they were clear of the local field, Ryan activated the long wall range sensors to search for traces of the original distress call. The ship glided through the silent emptiness, and Laura sat in the forward seat, watching the stars pass like slow drifting sparks. She could not help thinking about the old tales that claimed humans once traveled freely across the galaxy, building alliances, fighting enemies, and shaping the fate of many worlds. But generations had passed since then, and now they were little more than a whisper and forgotten stories told far away. Ours turned into a long, quiet stretch as they followed the faint signature left behind by the unknown vessel, and slowly the path took shape, leading them toward a region that human charts had not mapped in many decades. The deeper they traveled, the more the computer showed signs of unusual activity, as if ships had passed through recently, leaving behind traces of energy, but none of them belonged to humans, and this made both Laura and Ryan grow even more alert, because it suggested that the distress call had come from a place where conflict had already begun. Eventually the ship reached a broken trail of metallic fragments drifting in open space, and Ryan moved closer to examine them. These fragments looked like pieces of a destroyed vessel, and though their shape did not match human design, they still carried signs of advanced engineering, which suggested that the unknown species was not primitive. Laura stared at the debris and wondered whether the destroyed ship belonged to the sender of the message or to the hostile force that had captured them. Either answer brought new questions and no comfort. As the ship moved further, the sensors detected an energy signature that pulsed in a weak yet steady rhythm, and Ryan traced it to what looked like an escape pod drifting far from the main debris field. When they approached it, the pod did not respond to any signal, and it showed no signs of life inside, but it still held a memory core that might contain information about what happened. Laura ordered the pod brought aboard, and once it was safely inside, Ryan used careful tools to open the compartment containing the memory core without damaging it. The memory core flickered to life when connected to their system, and the display filled with strange symbols that shifted into a series of visual fragments showing a crew fleeing from an attack by a dark armored fleet. And Ryan slowed the playback as the images revealed sharp, angular ships surrounding the unknown vessel and boarding it quickly. The attackers moved fast and without hesitation, and they showed no sign of mercy. The recording grew unstable before showing the captain of the unknown ship sending out the distress call. Then the image collapsed into static and darkness. Laura studied the footage and felt a deep unease, because the attacking fleet did not resemble anything humans had fought in the past. Their ships looked built for rapid assault and overwhelming force, as if they valued speed and aggression above all else. She wondered how many more of these fleets were out there, and whether they had already found new sectors to conquer. The thought made her grip the console tighter, because if these forces found other peaceful worlds, they could cause great destruction, and if they found the hidden colony, the result could be even worse. Ryan checked the navigation data hidden in the memory core and discovered the last known route of the unknown
ship.
before it was attacked, and the path pointed toward a cluster of stars only a few jumps away from the colony, and this discovery made both of them go silent because it meant the hostile fleet was moving in a direction far too close for comfort. Laura knew they had to warn the colony, but she also knew they needed more information before returning because the Council would need solid proof to justify any large-scale action. They continued along the path until they reached a dim sector where even the stars seemed cold and distant, and the sensors detected faint traces of the hostile fleet, suggesting they had passed through not long ago. The idea that these ships could be so close filled Laura with a quiet dread, but she forced herself to stay focused because fear could not guide their mission. She told Ryan that they needed to follow the trail until they discovered the scale of the threat, because the future of the colony, and possibly even the wider galaxy, depended on what they learned next. And Ryan agreed because he understood that this was no longer a simple investigation, but the awakening of something far larger than either of them had imagined. As she spoke, the faces in the chamber grew pale and tense, because the idea of a massive and aggressive force searching the stars so near their hidden home struck fear into every member, and Ryan showed the memory core images to support their report, which made the air grow even heavier because the Council could see the cold precision of the attackers and the helplessness of the unknown species trying to flee, and the broken silence in the room reflected the collective understanding that humanity could face the same fate if they did nothing. When Laura finished, the leader of the Council asked her how much time they had before the enemy reached their sector, and she answered honestly that she did not know, because the fleet moved quickly, changed direction without pattern, which made it difficult to predict, but she knew they were close, and that waiting any longer would put them at risk, and the Council exchanged I know what must be done to protect the colony. Some argued that they should stay hidden and hope the enemy passed by without noticing, while others believed that hiding was no longer possible because once the enemy reached the sector, it would search every corner until they found something. And one member suggested evacuating deeper into the dark, but Laura reminded them that even if they moved, the enemy would still continue to expand across the galaxy, leaving destruction behind them, and running would not stop them. It would only delay the danger. Ryan stepped forward and spoke with steady resolve as he explained that the colony had trained for years to prepare for the moment when they could no longer remain hidden, and that their ships, though few, were strong enough to fight if they worked together. He also reminded them that the ancient stories described humanity as adaptable and determined, and that these traits still lived in the colony even after years of isolation, and that they could not ignore a threat that had already destroyed entire vessels of another species. After long discussion, the Council reached a decision that would change the course of their future, because they agreed that humanity must reveal itself to protect its people and to prepare for a greater conflict that was coming. And the leader of the Council declared that they would activate the Horizon Armada, which was the formation of ships built in secret over many years for a moment just like this, and none of the civilians had ever seen it, but the officers knew its power, and this decision echoed through the chamber like a distant thunder. Laura and Ryan left the chamber with a sense of urgency because they had much to prepare, and they went directly to the operations center where officers worked around the clock to activate the Armada, and the room buzzed with energy as screens lit up showing hidden hangars opening across the colony and ships rising from underground silos where they had been waiting in silence for decades. And Laura felt a mix of pride and worry as she watched the preparations, because she knew that these ships were powerful, but the enemy they faced was far stronger and far more ruthless. The Horizon Armada took shape as sleek vessels formed into organized lines, ready for deployment, and Ryan walked through one of the secondary hangars, running his hand along the hull of one of the heavy ships, and he felt a quiet strength in the metal because he knew that humanity had built these ships not for conquest, but for protection and survival. And now they would be tested for the first time in real battle, and he hoped that their technology combined with their determination would be enough to withstand what was coming. As the preparations continued, Laura met with the flight commanders too, explained the situation, and she spoke with clear and simple words so that no one misunderstood the threat they were about to face, and she told them that they would not be attacking. First, because the goal was not to start a war, but to protect their home from the fleet moving toward them, and she also told them that they might encounter survivors from the unknown species and that helping them would be part of their duty because humanity could not turn away from others who needed support. Later, Laura and Ryan returned to their ship to prepare for the first deployment, which would lead the Armada out of the colony and into the open galaxy, and Laura sat in the forward seat thinking about how everything had changed in such a short time because only days ago she believed they would live their lives quietly and unseen. Yet now they were about to reveal themselves to the galaxy for the first time in generations, and she felt steady fire growing inside her, because even though she feared what lay ahead, she also believed that humanity had waited long enough. The moment came when the Armada rose from the surface of the hidden world and broke through the upper shield in one smooth movement, and for the first time in many years, human ships appeared in the open galaxy, shining like silver arrows against the dark, and the sight filled Laura and Ryan with a deep sense of purpose, because they knew that once this step was taken there would be no return to the life they once had, and Ryan whispered that the galaxy would no longer think humans were only a myth, and Laura nodded, because now they were ready to be seen. As the Armada moved into formation, Laura set the course toward the sector where they had found the first signs of the enemy. And she knew that the moment they reached that region, everything would change, because they would either confront the hostile fleet or find traces of more destruction, and she hoped that they were not too late to protect others who might be fleeing. And she also hoped that the enemy had not yet discovered any hint of the colony, because if they had, then the coming battle would decide the survival of humanity. The ships advanced through the silent dark in perfect unity, and Laura watched the stars shift in front of them while feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders, because she knew that the next steps would shape the future of her people, and that the Armada must be ready to stand strong no matter what they faced. And as the horizon Armada moved deeper into the galaxy, humanity stepped out of myth and into reality, and the galaxy would soon learn that humans had returned, and they would not bow to any threat, no matter how great. The last day came with a strange calm as the human Armada held position near the broken edge of the battle lines, and every ship waited for the final word from the fleet command, and there was a quiet feeling across the crews, because they all knew this was the moment that would decide the fate of the Alliance and the future of every world that watched the war unfold. And no one felt this more than Captain Laura Mitchell, who stood at the front window of her ship and looked at the remains of enemy ships drifting like dark shapes in the empty space, and she knew the peace they had won was not real peace yet, and she could feel a heavy pressure rising inside her chest as she wondered what the next attack would look like and how much more the fleet would have to give to protect the Alliance. She walked down the command deck and saw her crew working in silence, and she passed by Daniel, Maria, Chris, Oliver, Nora, and Jake, and she felt proud of them because they had stayed strong through every firestorm, and they had not broken, even when the enemy turned the sky into a wall of flames, and she knew they would follow her anywhere. But she also knew they had given enough, and she wished this last step would not ask more of them. Alliance ships around them sent out soft signals as they waited for the human flagship to speak, and the alien commanders kept their eyes fixed on the glowing maps, because none of them wanted to face the enemy alone again, and there was a quiet respect in the air, because after seeing what humans could do, no one doubted their strength anymore. They no longer thought of humans as myths, because they had seen their fire and their courage and their will to protect others, even when the battle looked impossibly at that same moment in a dark and distant part of space. The enemy Leadership gathered inside. Cold chamber, and their voices were sharp and restless, and they spoke of fear, even though they tried to hide it because they had never imagined that humans would rise again, or that their armada would break the chains that were set to destroy them, and won. Leader shouted that humans should not exist anymore, and that they must attack one last time, but another warned that, if they attacked now, they would face a force greater than anything they had seen in the long history of their wars, and their voices carried the sound of doubt through the chamber back near. The fleet Laura received a message from General Harrison, and his voice was steady as always, and he told her the enemy had begun to move again, and that this would be the last fight, because the enemy wanted to crush them before the Alliance could recover. And he said she had proved more than enough already. But he still needed her and her crew and her ship, because the line could not hold without them, and she took a slow breath and accepted the order because she knew the fleet would need every hand. The alarm spread across the Armada as enemy ships appeared from the dark and formed a massive arc, and their engines glowed like storm clouds gathering before a great wave, and the Alliance ships had moved into position around the human fleet because they had learned that staying close to humans was the safest place to be, and the calm before the battle broke as the first bright streaks crossed the space between the two forces and lit the sky with long trails of fire. Laura ordered her crew to shield the front line, and Daniel guided the ship with a steady hand while Maria checked every system, and Nora worked the sensors, and Jake worked the heavy guns, and Chris stood by the shields, and the ship moved into the thick of the battle as the enemy fired again and again, and the shock waves shook the hull, but the ship held its place and fired back with precision and force, and every strike pushed the enemy line back. The battle spread across the sky like a storm, and human ships flew in tight waves and hit the enemy from all sides, and the Alliance ships followed their lead, and together they broke through the enemy arc and pushed into the center, where the command vessel of the enemy waited, and Laura knew this was the moment that would decide the war. She sent out a final message to the Alliance telling them they would aim for the command vessel, and the others should hold the line, and she could hear the voices of different commanders answering her with trust and hope, and some even said they believed in the humans now more than ever, and Laura felt a warm surge of determination as she drove the ship forward. The enemy command vessel released a heavy wave of energy that shook every ship around, and the sky turned bright and loud as explosions rang through the fleet, and some ships drifted out of formation, but the humans pushed ahead, and their engines roared as they broke through the heavy fire and headed straight for the command vessel. Jake fired the main cannon, and the blast hit the enemy shields and broke through a part of them, and Maria called out that the ship's systems were holding, but only barely, and Daniel pushed the engines harder, and Chris shifted power to the front shields, and Nora marked the weak points on the vessel, and Laura ordered a second strike, and the cannon fired again, and the shield broke open. The enemy command ship tried to pull back, but the humans followed close and fired a final shot that hit the core, and the whole vessel lit up with a bright flash that spread across the sky, and the enemy fleet froze as they saw their command fall, and then their ships began to retreat at once because they had no one left to guide them, and fear spread through their ranks, and they ran from the field. A deep silence fell across the Armada as the last enemy ship vanished into the dark, and the Alliance ships waited for Laura to speak, and she told them the war was over, and that the fleet had won, and the voices of many worlds filled the channels with cheers and relief, and the sky that had been full of fire and death now felt open and wide again. The fleet returned to the Alliance worlds, the people came out to greet them, and the aliens looked at the humans with awe and respect, and they told stories of how they had once thought humans were myths, but now they knew humans were real and strong and brave. They promised that from this day forward, humans would no longer stand in the shadows of legends, but as partners and protectors, and Laura felt a quiet pride as she watched her crew step off the ship and walk into the new future. They had helped Creatand as the light of the new dawn spread across the Alliance world's every ship that had survived the war stood as proof that courage could rise again, even from ashes, and that strength could come from the most unlikely places, and that hope could survive even in the darkest corners of space.